Can I just introduce a couple of house rules? If you can please turn your mobile phones to silent, if you haven't already, and during the question and answers, can you wait for the microphone for the benefit of the video that we're filming of this event? So I'm just going to introduce the chair for tonight. It's Patrick Smith, editor of Africa Confidential. And one final thing to say is that this event has been made possible by Congo Connect, who put together this amazing exhibition that you see around you. Please do stick around afterwards to take a look at these great pictures. And thank you also to the Royal African Society for what they've done to put together the event. Thanks.
Well, good evening. Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much for turning out. We've got a stellar panel this evening, and I think we need it because for 50 or so years, Congo has periodically gripped the international headlines. Certainly in my working life as a journalist for the last 20, we've been writing about some of the worst looting, expropriation of natural resources in the world, some of the most bitter warfare. But on the other hand, there's some of the most inventive, creative music, literature being produced in the same country, and a country of survivors and very much taking on both the perceptions of the world about the country and also demanding a new future. And I think in a way what we're trying to do tonight, as well as looking at some of the grim realities, we're also going to try and talk about the ideas to fix those realities, change those realities for the better, and after 50 years of struggle, work out how Congo can shape a new future and start to tap the undoubted riches, both material and human, of the country. To do that, we've got, as I say, a tremendous panel. On my extreme right, without any political connotation,
the only woman.
we have the only woman, Noella Korsasis Musunka. On my immediate right, we have Jean-Roger Kaseke, and on my left, we have Ben Shepherd. And shortly joining us is going to be Kasim Kaira from the BBC World Service, who has been covering Congo and the Great Lakes region for many years, and he's coming hot foot from Centrepoint building as we speak. So perhaps to start the ball rolling, each of the panelists is going to introduce themselves and speak partly about this exhibition and this Congo Week, and also particularly about their ideas for moving Congo forward. And I'd like to start with Jean-Roger, who is a human rights campaigner here and has worked here and in the Democratic Republic of Congo. He's also a Labour councillor from Tollington Ward, Islington, and has also worked as a research associate at London Metropolitan University. So without further ado, Jean-Roger, if you'd like to start and get the discussion going.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Good evening, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here tonight. I would like, first of all, to thank the Frontline Club and the Royal African Society and Congo Connect for organizing this event. It is great to be here and to see the display of this fantastic exhibition tonight, which remind me a previous exhibition on sexual violence organized by CAFOD, the Catholic Agency for Overseas Development, in 2010. Looking at the displays from these exhibitions, you can read key messages: security and impunity, leadership, governance, food security, displacement. This is the reality of the Democratic Republic of Congo, a country that has been through a lot for a very long time. More than 50 years of instability, horror, massive violation of human rights, war crime, crimes against humanity, and even genocide. This is shocking. I'm very pleased today to speak about security and impunity, which is very important. Because without security and impunity, it will be very difficult for the international community to stabilize Congo. The culture of impunity needs to be tackled. There has been a UN mapping exercise on human rights from 1993 to 2003, which accused countries in the region, especially Rwanda, for committing war crime in the DRC. No one has been brought to book. There has been another report from the UN condemning the recent rebellion to M23, a rebellion from an army mutiny, and war crimes were condemned by the UN. And countries in the region, such as Rwanda, were accused again by the UN for supporting the M23 to destabilize the DRC, which is a sovereign country. And again, no one has been brought to book. This pattern of letting those responsible for war crimes, crime against humanity, and even genocide, letting them free without arresting them for justice to be done, is a recipe for more and more militias to be created in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. So I think we need now a robust strategy from the international community, a concerted strategy for disarming all the militias in the region. Disarming the Hutu militias inside Democratic Republic of Congo forest, disarming the militia, the Lord Resistance Army, and even disarming the M23. That is the way forward for paving the way for peace, to talk peace, for peace process. The culture of impunity should be tackled. The second point is about security, the security challenges. we need a robust strategy in the region about a strong and workable strategy on defense capabilities. We need a very strong Congolese national army. To get that, the DRC will need help from the international community. And I think, in my view, with the DRC as part of the Commonwealth of Nations, the DRC will get much needed help to build a strong national army and to address so many challenges confronting the DRC with the solutions of the 21st century. That is my view. And I think, yeah, that's my introduction.
Thank you very much, Jean-Roger. I think I'll turn now to Ben Rollins, who is an Associate Fellow of the Africa Program at Chatham House and was formerly a Great Lakes specialist at the Commonwealth Office and has also worked in the House of Commons on the Great Lakes issue. And I know he's got some very specific views on the security crisis in the east of Congo and what can be done to fix it, particularly this latest proposal to have a neutral force to patrol that Rwanda-Congolese border. So Ben, over to you.
Thanks, Patrick. And I'd first like to echo Jean-Roger in saying thanks to the people who've organised this. You know, watching the DRC in the region for a bit more than a decade, it's always been a bit frustrating that the media attention on it goes in spikes. The media moves, mainstream media at least, moves like a sort of shoal of fish, if you like. Everyone looks at one point for a few weeks and then attention wanders, and it feels like we're in a little bit of a hiatus in relation to the conflict in the Kivus in particular, that there was the spike of violence and attention in late 2012, and it's all gone a little bit quiet. So I think the timing of this event is very good. We don't often get the chance to talk about the sort of more deeper structural long-term issues without immediate questions of conflict getting in the way. They're not important. I also think it's good timing, and this speaks to what Patrick was saying, that it feels watching the conflict in the East, particularly the conflict around the M23, that there may be a chance over the course of 2013 and beyond for things to evolve slightly differently. That often it feels like an extended sort of case of deja vu watching Eastern DRC. There are these endless iterations of very similar looking cycles that rebel groups from the RCD launched in '98 through the CNDP in 2006 through to the M23 feel like they are sort of repeating the same patterns essentially with the same motivations and often the same actors. But for me, I think it's hard to see now where the M23 or putative successor could go. The numbers of armed men under the control of those successor rebel groups have dropped from 20,000 under the RCD to a few hundred probably under the M23. And Rwanda's role in supporting the M23 became sort of openly acknowledged and understood towards the end of last year, and Rwanda faced fairly significant pressure from the international community, including suspension of development aid. So it's hard to see now whether it's possible for the M23 to kind of relaunch itself, which perhaps opens something of a window. I mean, this is all very optimistic, for some of the more structural issues facing Eastern DRC to be dealt with. You know, the really complicated mess of factors from land to citizenship to identity that have driven the mobilization in the plethora of armed groups that have popped up across Eastern DRC to at least be addressed. And it's one thing I've often felt the international community has got wrong over the last sort of 8 years or so, is that there was a sense after 2006 that Congo was a post-conflict country. And a lot of the policies put in place were predicated on the idea that you could do sort of constructive state building and stabilization work, when actually the conflict never really stopped. So, you know, my starting point is one of very, very cautious optimism, that actually there may be a window now to start to address these things, assuming the diplomatic picture can be got right around the M23. And as Patrick alluded to, the question of a possible SADC force going in, I think could be important if the modalities of that can be got right. But finally, and I'll stop, you know, that doesn't minimize the really deep structural questions about the way Congolese politics functions. And it's striking, reading some of the stuff that was written about Mobutu Zaire in the 70s, how accurate they feel about the current system if you just change some of the names and dates. The DNA of Congolese politics feels very robust, actually, and it's survived successive kind of wars, changed leadership, elections, and actually the sort of bones of it don't feel very different. So how that's changed is really difficult to know, and perhaps something we can discuss. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Ben. Noel, could you speak on your issues with the exhibition and your perspective generally? You're the founder of the
George Malaika Foundation, and you were born in Lubumbashi. Perhaps you could say something about the foundation as well, just to enlighten those of us who don't know what it's doing.
Yes, so I will come from a different angle, from a story of a Congolese born in the Congo. So I was born in the Congo, and my dad died when I was 5. So my mother didn't have any resources to keep me. So I grew up from families to families, and I went to see back my mother after 13 years. And I was very shocked to see how many kids were out of school, how much poverty, how much little development we have in the Congo with so much resources. So I promised myself I will come back one day. So I started my modeling career in London and New York, and I set up the George Malaika in New York. All the international team is volunteer, including myself, and we only pay the local staff. So we have the first project. We built a school in the southern east of Congo, and we operate it. We have 152 girls. We want really to offer quality education. We're offering them 2 meals a day. Everything is free. We're putting a lot of training, emphasis on the training of the teachers. We built 2 wells in the village. The wells has an impact for more than 8,000 people a year, that decreasing illness and improving the hygiene. We're doing with the FIFA a community center. We started the construction last week, so it's very exciting. It will be based on sport, health, and education. And we're trying really to bring other foundations and other organizations to come in the Congo, because a lot of people are afraid, or they're saying this doesn't work, it's so much hassles. So we're working with different organizations. We brought more than 12 health containers worth of $500,000 each container, and we have more than 30% mortality rate coming down. So I think the solution is a lot to work together. As a Congolese, I think it's important to show the solution is with us. We can work together. We need to empower the people on the ground. Our staff is all local staff, and it's amazing to see how many hours they work, how much care they're caring about their own country and about their own kids, own population. It's what is happening in the Congo, more than 15 years of war, more than 6 million people died. I think we are at a point where we have enough. To see a room full like this, I think you're bringing a lot of support and concern about Congo, but what can we do next? What is the solution? What are the actions? And I think this is all together. We have to push that we need peace. A few months ago, we had the M23. Last year, it was the CNDPS and CNDPC. And every year, it's somebody else, another rebellion group. And we have to stop this cycle, because people on the ground are tired of suffering, tired of no development, tired of rape. We need to create a middle class, and yesterday I was here to speak about one of the pictures, what is really the meaning of education. More than 7 million of kids out of school. People are not educated. At our school, we're teaching the kids, but we have emphasize to teach the communities. The parents doesn't know to read and write. So how are we gonna put this engine of Congo that is so huge if they are not educated, the middle class, and to push we need to be in control of our own resources. Our resources are leaving the country, but they're not developing Congo. If these resources can develop Congo, can bring infrastructures, can bring roads, electricity, energy, internet, and all of that, iPhone, BlackBerry, it's sad. We have the most biggest reserve of coltan, of what you all have in your cell phone and laptops, but we're not developed enough to use this old technology. So I think that, and what I want to say, that is funny, when I started George Malaika Foundation, more than 40% of donations are coming from Congolese people on the ground coming to bring a cement bag to build a school, or to bring food for the kids, or to donate every month a certain amount. And then what is very amazing, we living in Congo with so much international aid. I think it's important to have this international aid, but we cannot be dependent on that.
Well, thanks very much, Noella. Perhaps we should try and look at some of the core issues that have come out so far. I think clearly security is a major issue. We've heard about the militias in the east. We've heard about the attempts by the UN and the African Union to broker some sort of deal. I think we could talk more about that. I think we also perhaps should talk about the internal dynamics of Congo. Congo has, at best, a dysfunctional army. We were talking about that just before this meeting started. And Jean-Roger said, well, really, in the past 50 years, you can't really say Congo's had an army. It's had a garde présidentielle for successive leaders, but it hasn't had a national army that's capable of defending national sovereignty. And we saw what happened in Mali when that was the case. And in a sense, in Congo, successive regimes in Congo have faced these sorts of incursions. Sometimes where you have armies from 6 or 7 different countries impinging on Congolese territory. So I think it's worth us talking about that. I think that also, as we've got 2 speakers from Katanga, I don't think we can avoid the issue of the massive wealth. This year, 2 mining companies, Xstrata and Glencore, are getting married. And they're having a beautiful baby called Glenstrata. And that's going to be one of the biggest commodity companies in the world. It's going to have a direct line from the production of minerals to the beneficiation of those minerals and the trading of those minerals on the international market. What is quite interesting about this marriage is that a lot of it is premised on the Congo, on the access of Glencore's and Glencore's subsidiaries to the mining wealth of the Congo. And it's not at all clear that those deals that gave Glencore access to those mineral riches were transparent and accountable in any way. In fact, quite the reverse. It appears that Glencore has been working with a range of intermediaries, including Dan Gertler and his colleagues, and they have been extracting the wealth of the country at knockdown rates. And it's a great irony that we're talking about Congo struggling to find resources at a time when Congo's own resources are being used to push up the share price of one of the biggest commodity companies in the world. So I think that needs some attention. Then the other issues are the political issues. We've talked, Jean-Roger talked briefly about provincial authorities and so on. In theory this year, there's going to be a season of elections, both provincial elections, local government elections, and the importance of those elections are that under the new constitution, power is meant to be devolved to these new provinces, and not only political power but also fiscal power. So there's meant to be the introduction of a fiscal federal system in Congo, and some people see great hope in that somehow the political system will become more functional when it's brought down to a local level. There are those who have always said, well, Congo's far too big to govern. So this is a way of keeping the size of the Congolese territory, as this one of the biggest countries in the world, in fact, intact, but trying to devolve power to local units to run more efficient governments. It'll be interesting to see what people's views are on the prospects of that. And then I also think there's another set of issues. We've touched on it already with the mention of the United Nations reports and Rwanda and Uganda, but is Congo in the world, Congo particularly immediately in the region? Who are Congo's friends and why? Which countries are helping Congo? Which countries are hindering Congo? And how are those relations likely to change in the coming years? What can be done to enable Congo to increase its diplomatic power? One suggestion was that Congo joins the Commonwealth. The other suggestions that its alliance with South Africa and Angola should be used more to its advantage to balance the pressure from the east. So it'll be good to hear what you think in the audience about this. So maybe what we'll do first is to go through the panel and get their views on some of these issues, but do feel free to interject, ask questions, make statements or whatever as we try and work through some of these issues. So I'll go back in the same order. Jean-Roger, what do you think about, shall we start with the resource issue? Because we haven't really touched on that yet. What's your view of the way in which Congo's cobalt, copper, diamond, gold riches have been misused? Both corruption in the international system, which is obviously playing a major role, and corruption within internal politics in Congo. What can be done to contain that and to change it?
Thank you, Patrick. Illegal exploitation of Congo's vast mineral wealth is fueling conflict. It is because of the minerals that Eastern Congo is in flames. So what do we need to do? First of all, we need to make sure that Congo's vast mineral wealth are exploited and used sustainably. Congo mineral wealth is there to help the country to move forward, develop, and be a potential powerhouse in the region. This is why we need accountability. Accountability will come from a responsible government. A responsible government will function properly with devolved power. As you just heard that Congo is a big country, the size of Western Europe. Decentralization of power is necessary. Decentralization of power will allow Congo to function properly, will allow Congo state institutions to function properly. And this is where the country will be able, with its military, a strong military, with the reform on security sector, with a strong police force, and even a strong immigration force. That is the way Congo will be able to tackle the illegal exploitation of minerals. And countries in the region, such as Rwanda, Uganda, and Burundi, should be made and asked to sign a memorandum of understanding. Memorandum of understanding to stop the illegal exploitation of mineral. And devolved power will improve as well relation in the region, because Congo shares its borders with 9 countries. From these 9 countries, Congo shares its border with 6 countries on the eastern side of Congo: Zambia, Tanzania, Uganda, Burundi, Rwanda, South Sudan Republic. And most of these countries are English-speaking countries, meaning that the dynamic in the region is toward the east of Congo, meaning that the dynamic for the region, for regional integration, which is needed to boost Congo's trade potential in the region for development. So Congo will need to be part of the East African community for creating a very strong alliance, creating very strong regional integration, for boosting trade, business opportunities.
Sharing intelligence on security basis to stop the illegal exploitation of minerals. So the government needs to be accountable. The government needs to build its state institution. And above all, the government needs help from the international community as well. This is where I will appeal to the international community to do more in that aspect of stopping the illegal exploitation of minerals,
of helping Congo to rebuild its national army, to be strong, capable of defending Congo's borders, of a police force capable of providing law and order, capable of stopping the illegal exploitation of minerals.
Thanks. Jean-Roger, do you think the government itself should come under greater scrutiny when we're talking about the illegal exploitation of minerals? I mean, after all these deals, these big companies we're talking about, Those deals are signed off by members of the government. They approve these deals. They're not transparent. They're not accountable. They're with, we've seen that state assets, as many, I think Global Witness estimates that several $1 billion worth of state assets have been taken from ownership of the Congolese people and sold off to private concerns. Gécamine has lost some of its best mining assets in Katanga. Who do you hold responsible in the government for this, and what do you think should be done to stop it?
I think this government, when it was elected in 2006, and then re-elected with allegation of electoral irregulation in 2011. First of all, in 2006, people expected and hoped that this government will be a democratic government, will abide by the rules, and it will not be corrupt. Unfortunately, people realize now this is a government that is corrupt. It is very difficult with a government, a corrupt government, to stop the illegal exploitation of minerals because they are involved. They are signing deals behind in the closed door, behind the back. They are doing these dodgy deals because it is not a proper government, a responsible government. It is a corrupt government. So I hold this government responsible for the situation there. It is regrettable.
Why do you think there isn't more of a fuss about this? Well, you know, almost 100 years ago, there was a campaign in this country against the depredations of Belgian colonialism in the Congo, particularly King Leopold and his successors, and the atrocities they wreaked on the people in the Congo and the brutal extraction. That campaign actually took off. If you read Hochschild's book, he goes into great detail about how that campaign was organized at a time when it was much harder to get information, let alone international information about political developments. Why now, with the internet, Twitter, Facebook, and everything else, is there not a campaign to do something about this, which, as you say, which is just wide-ranging theft and the depriving of a generation of their birthright? Have you got any ideas why the campaign hasn't really taken off?
I thank you very much for this question. First of all, I'm pleased we are here discussing Congo. This has never been the case before. Now we are discussing Congo more often, which is actually welcoming. And I think what we need is continuing discussing and lobbying Western government about what is happening there in the Congo. As you said, during King Leopold, it took someone to write an article in the paper to denounce what was happening there. The British consul, Roger Casement, denouncing a genocide occurring in the DRC during King Leopold. And that was the first genocide in Africa, actually. Almost 20 million of indigenous Congolese people slaughtered by King Leopold. So it is not even in the news, but we are talking about this now. What we need is going forward with lobbying, more lobbying our members of parliament, lobbying our government, lobbying the international community. And then this is how we will make forward this campaign, and then we will make a difference. And then by doing what we are doing, such as today, this exhibition actually is highlighting those atrocities, those suffering, the horror history of the DRC. I'm pleased it is happening, and I understand this exhibition will be displayed in New York.
Yes, yeah. A few years ago they have the same kind of exhibition in New York, but we hope it won't be for many years more. We want peace. But the problem of security is huge, because Dr. Mukwege had an amazing speech at the UN in September, and I was with him at the conference of Clinton. We're having the discussion on the Congo too. So yes, people hear more and more about Congo, but a few weeks later he went back to Congo and they tried to assassinate him. So as long as we don't have justice, impunity, protecting our borders, it will be a continuing conflict, and of course the exploitation of minerals. But I think it would be good to hear about you, because you came the best for the end, maybe.
Kassim, let me give you, we mentioned that you were coming, so you have been actually sort of already got a bit of an introduction, but you were held up in the traffic. Kassim Kayira from the BBC. We're talking about exploitation, extraction, illegal extraction of the Congolese minerals. We're talking about the security issue in the east. We're talking about the political calendar this year, elections and so on, condition of the national army. So perhaps, come into the debate. Perhaps maybe start on the mining issue and get into the border security.
Thank you very much, Patrick Smith, and
it's an honor to be amongst the panel, and apologies for
arriving late. There was a mix-up. My colleague Jean-Roger Kaseki here, I think, was mentioning a very important aspect about how Congo could see itself coming out of the situation that it is in right now. With the minerals, or the illegal exploitation of minerals, I think the problem has been a lot to do with the system. It has to go back to the
system upon which the country as DRC is built. You have a very weak government, and despite efforts to try to come up with a new mineral law to sort of try to re-energize the sector and therefore try to control this, what it has done is actually cut out deals that were signed in the past, allow the signing of new deals, and therefore a new cut for whoever didn't get the cut from the first one to get an opportunity to get this one. Built around a very weak system, I think that has been
really the problem. But also the fact that resulting from the lack of a strong government, a strong leadership that is in control of what is happening, it has allowed fiefdoms to sort of develop. You grow up in Congo. My father got into Congo, I think, around 1930, 1932. He was a businessman. He went there. He worked with for the Belgians, taken there by force to work as a driver there. But the experiences that I built from him, which actually allowed me now to get a lot of interest and be part of Congo, is the fact that even within that time already, there was a problem. The government that was in Kinshasa after independence did not have a full control of what was happening in the east of the country. As a result, governors now got a lot of powers in return for providing favors to whoever is in Kinshasa. So as a minister, you didn't need to come all the way to Lubumbashi or to Kisangani or to Kindu to get your cut. It would find you in Kinshasa during a governor's meeting. This allowed, of course, now people to create fiefdoms. The governors got a lot of power, but the money was not filtering down to the communities. As part of the solution that has been suggested, some people have gone as far as being extreme in saying they need federalism. I think Congo as now as it is difficult to have federalism as a system. Probably the best way to start from would be a decentralized system, where money can actually be collected from the grassroots, and a percentage, a proportion of that money remains in the grassroots and is able therefore to do projects. Because now the problem is the money is collected, is taken, and then it has to come back, and the process is very difficult. The lack of leadership is very painful. I was there in last year One senior military officer who was in charge of the east of Congo goes to Kinshasa to collect salaries for soldiers. He actually gets the full bag in his hand and has to fly back to come and pay the soldiers. Definitely, if you put that money in my hands, I would be tempted. What the money does, therefore, is it is reinvested, gets a bit of profit, and then that's when the salaries come down to the soldiers. You have given soldiers weapons, you have not paid them a salary. What do you expect them to do? I think this is the dilemma, that because you don't have a system that is clear where, for example, every soldier should have an account where his money gets on into the monthly salary, goes into the account straight away. It's not like Congo is poor. It's not like the money is not there. The money is there, but it is going to the wrong hands. If someone could go and collect this money and keep it to themselves before they pay the money, you see what that actually means. So for me, starting from this mining, the illegal exploitation of minerals, it didn't start today. You've just touched about King Leopold and Belgium and how much they took away. This is quite always overlooked, and Rwanda always comes into the picture as the big thief in this situation. But if I were Rwanda, I think in the circumstances, given the confusion that is there, what has happened is that individuals now have gone in and they have to go and market the minerals. If you have a market that is available, what do you do in that situation? It doesn't make it right. All I'm saying is because of the lack of structures, because of lack of a clear system, it has allowed the illegal trade to go on, and that is how the minerals end up in countries like Rwanda and Uganda. It didn't start today. So coming out of this situation, you would need to have, one, security sector reforms, which are serious and strict. You need to have an army that has a national face. And what I mean by this is you have Tutsi soldiers who have rebelled recently. Yes, there has been an issue whether they are fully Congolese, but by all intent, they are Congolese because they are living in part of Congo. But why should these soldiers be in a particular area where they can cause a revolt when they could easily be deployed in the west of the country? So you need a security sector reform that would allow to have an army that would be fully Congolese by purpose, by intent, and by action. Two, I think you need serious democratic reforms. And this goes to the very root of the problem again. President Kabila, unfortunately, has proved to be a very weak leader. If you look at the elections in 2006, the mandate, the kind of voting that the votes that he got at the time was quite overwhelming. People had hopes that for once now we were going to begin to get some sense. Unfortunately, because he's still carrying the luggage from the past, luggage left by his father, luggage left by President Mobutu, he has failed to shed himself of this luggage. And this luggage is proving to be a burden now. The moment he tries to do that, it turns into a problem. So the democratic reforms now at least would allow good governance, where people, teachers, civil servants spend 3 months, 5 months without a salary, and all they're expecting is $100, which doesn't arrive within 5 to 6 months. What do you expect the person to be doing in the meantime? These are the things that actually allow corruption to thrive. So in my opinion, in my humble opinion, I think, one, security sector reform, which is very difficult to come with, get an army, get a police, get a judicial police that seriously works. Two, democratic reforms. I don't know if we would have to repeat the elections of 2011, which many people believe actually were rigged, including the international community, whether there should be a repeat, or whether now President Kabila now can bring in other people in this in the governance to allow, at least open up political space, because there isn't any political space. You can only talk within a political space, and I don't think there is one. Patrick, I think.
Great. Well, you're off to a flying start. Thanks very much for that. Let me ask Ben to come in now, because you've got some very specific views on this issue of security in the East and where we are. Maybe you could describe to the audience just what these proposals are. The idea of SADC getting involved with security in the Great Lakes group, and whether you think it's workable, at least what needs to work, and what is the role of the UN in all this, because it seems to be a bit muddy what the UN is up to here.
Sure. Is it workable? The background to it is as I'm sure many of you know, the inability of the Congolese military to take on the M23 and its predecessor groups, repeatedly defeated, albeit towards the end of last year with substantial Rwandan assistance, as sort of documented by various UN panels. So the solution proposed by the region is a SADC force of people who talked about 2,500 troops, others have talked about 4,000. Remains to be seen how big and who, led by the Tanzanians. You know, there's a full graveyard of international and regional initiatives to watch the border between the DRC and Rwanda, from joint verification missions to...
Who's going to finance this? Is it going
Well,
to be
that's
the
the
UN
question. That's exactly what SADC is coming back and asking.
Right.
It's one of the big problems. The other is rules of engagement. It's one of the more longer-term problems with the way the UN mission has done or not done the job it was intended to do in Congo. The various troop-contributing countries, majority of the troops come from India and Pakistan, I think about 11,000 of them, have different ideas about what their troops are there to do, different agreements with the UN system, and different levels of sort of robustness as to whether they're actually allowed to go and fight, or whether they're there more in a sort of self-defense stance. You know, is it worthwhile? I think it is. I wouldn't hold out much hope for these troops going in there and fighting wars. I'm not sure they'll be allowed to do it, and if they're under a UN mandate, which I think it seems to be the way it's likely to happen, they may not be allowed to. It's more that it changes the politics. I think there's a very different weight to shooting at and humiliating Tanzanians and South Africans than there is to shooting at Congolese. And you know, in terms of the level of scrutiny from the region that the various actors in play in Eastern Congo will be under, I think it's symbolically very important. And it speaks to slightly like you asked earlier about, you know, who are Congo's friends, what should people be doing, and it feels that Congo's suffered over the years from not having, you know, a country like the UK played the role in Sierra Leone, for instance, a country that was prepared to lead, to coordinate, to take the sort of responsibility and the burden of doing a lot of the work. DRC's never had that. I think most countries have been too frightened of how complicated it was and how difficult it was, and that they'd get burned by doing it. But I think, you know, the regional players in SADC can play that role. South Africa has enormous investments already in the DRC. The Excom Grand Inga project, you know, looking to capitalise on the massive hydroelectric potential of the Congo River is just one example, but it's multi-billion dollars. They have the weight, the ability, and I think, sort of most importantly, the stakes are much higher for the Congo's neighbours than they are for the UK or for the US or for anyone else. So for me, part of the answer will be the implication of the region more actively. I just wanted to come back to the question of natural resources, just briefly. Something that Jean-Roger said, that you know, the violence in the East, conflict in the East is a resource war, and it's something that's become slightly paradigmatic in the way that we think about Eastern DRC. For me, it's not, you know, it doesn't tell the whole story. The natural resources have been really important in fueling the violence, and have certainly, you know, if you look at the pattern of deployments of some of the armed groups, that yes, they match to mining areas, and people are very concerned about making the money, but the underlying problems for me in Eastern DRC are political, and I think it's important we allow, in the debates internationally, allow actors in places like Eastern DRC to be political. There's a sort of a little bit of an oversimplification that goes on that people must be mobilized either by anger or by greed, and I think it's much more sophisticated than that, and the roots of the violence go back a very long way and connect to questions about citizenship and about the relationship of people to the state, which have never been resolved, really. And exactly as was said, you know, the system that's been in play in the DRC since the 30s and possibly before that, but is alienating of individuals from the state, that relations are mediated through local barons, as was said, and I think that's still true to some extent. And it may seem slightly sort of academic, but it speaks to this question of where change will come from. How can people be mobilized to change? You know, there were protests after the elections of 2011, but they weren't very big. Thoughts of a Congo Spring or, you know, mass mobilization, getting people out on the street to press for change haven't happened, and it's extraordinary watching someone like Congo that is fantastically wealthy, and yet that wealth goes to a very, very few people. It's often the same families that were involved under Mobutu who are involved now. And part of the problem is there's not much to mobilize around, I think. You know, Congolese people in general don't trust politics, they don't trust politicians at all. And if the choice is you can carry on working and feed your family, or you can go out, make no money, not be able to feed your family and risk getting shot, no one's going to risk it. So that the fundamental question for me is how that self-sustaining cycle of disenchantment can be broken. And I'm afraid I don't have answers for it.
You mentioned the political issues. What's your take on British policy? Because Britain has been pretty roundly criticised for failing to criticise Rwanda and Uganda, being absolutely in bed with Paul Kagame and Yoweri Museveni in a metaphorical sense, and to Congo's detriment, and as has the United States, particularly in terms of trying to prevent this UN report, which was very critical of Rwanda and Uganda last year, prevent this report being discussed at the UN Security Council. Do you see signs of change in British policy? And to what extent is British policy in line with the rest of the European Union? Is there a difference between Britain and France and Belgium? As you said, you asked the question yourself, does Congo have a cheerleader in the West? And who is that cheerleader if it does?
Yeah. I thought I'd get asked this. I have to be careful to some extent. I mean, there were big differences in the EU, particularly between the UK and France. I don't think that's any secret. I think that distance has reduced massively. I don't think there's an enormous difference in perspective now. Where the criticisms that the UK and others came into for not taking a harder line with Rwanda earlier, I think there's a number of different factors that played out in that. The first is that we're not very good at thinking regionally. The way that policy is done is siloed down into specific countries. Embassies make their decisions, and the embassies don't necessarily even talk to each other. So there's a sense that you can do a Rwanda policy and a DRC policy, and no one's there sitting there thinking, well, hold on a sec, don't these things influence each other? I think that the system seems to be getting a little bit better at that. Part of what that meant for Eastern DRC is it fell off the map. There were people posted in Kigali and people posted in Kinshasa having big rows with each other, and no one was giving voice to what was actually happening on the ground in the Kivus. People didn't go there very often. The people that were there were NGOs, they weren't governments. People didn't necessarily trust the information that came out. And as I'm sure many of you will know, the chaos of the Kivus is hard to overstate. It's very difficult to know exactly what's going on. Goma is a horrendous rumour mill. There's an alphabet soup of different armed groups, organisations. Getting information out of that kind of environment that people can trust to the point where they'll change policy on the back of it is really very difficult indeed. I know that, Patrick, you were involved in a UN panel working in those regions. It's not an easy thing. I think that the change has been incremental, partly because the focus has shifted to the Kivus, and that focus has brought more information with it, and that information has, over time, very, very slowly made clear what's been going on. And, the freeze in British aid last year, along with the Germans, the EU, AFDB, a whole host of international actors, I think reflects something of a sea change. And for me, it's one of the reasons when I spoke earlier, I said I was vaguely hopeful, and it's partly that I think it's going to be very difficult to put that genie back in the bottle. Now there's been an acknowledgement of this cross-border role by Rwanda. It's difficult for the same pattern to repeat itself of the Rwandans or the Ugandans, indeed anyone else, coming in and supporting a rebel group in Eastern DRC without it being immediately obvious to the rest of the world. They may choose to do that and take the consequences, that's something else, but the era, those sort of 10 years of almost willed ignorance, I don't quite mean that necessarily, but have gone, and I think that's probably a positive thing. I think what the terms of the conversation between the international community and Rwanda particularly can be now, I think will be really important. Does that answer the question?
Well, sure. It's getting some information out there. I mean, perhaps the audience, you either voted for this government or you didn't vote for them. You certainly pay your taxes, so the Foreign Office is spending your money. Who is happy with the British government's policy on Congo at the moment? Do you think the British government is an honest broker between Congo and Rwanda, or do you want to see change? What's the view in the audience? Any hands? Any strong points of view anywhere? Anyone up there? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Carolyn Hames from Peace Direct. We support 2 projects in the Congo, and in fact, during the M23 crisis, we were able to give the Foreign Office and DFID daily updates from 6 major centres of population because our partners know what's going on, even if nobody else does. I think most of the issues that have been discussed are really difficult to think of solving in less than decades. And I'm reminded that it took the UK 12 years to get from the Good Friday Agreement to an agreement on policing, so why should it be quick in the Congo? But there is one thing that I think is starting to happen, which is really important, and that is an experiment to pay the soldiers using a system like M-Pesa. And it sort of baffled me that the UK government spent, I think, £30 million on security sector reform, achieved, as far as we can see, very little, when actually this is such a simple idea that you pay people through their mobile phones, you know the money gets to them, and then the soldiers have no excuse to go on raping and looting and generally adding to the conflict rather than reducing it, and no excuse to just run away from the M23 when they're being paid a salary to fight them. So I really hope that this experiment works and that it doesn't get sabotaged, and that it can be maybe even extended to some of the other groups you mentioned, the civil servants and the teachers. Thank you.
Any other views on the lady right in the front row?
And I think the gentleman at the back.
Thank you. Can you tell us what you do, where you're from, and so on?
My name is Victoria Dimanja from Liberation Congolese Women's Group. Before I come on to the UK government, I would like to say that I agree with you all about the lack of leadership and bad governance in Congo. Surely, Congo is a bankrupt country where the state doesn't exist. It exists on the paper only. So all these issues raised here stem from the lack of leadership, as you said. But the starting point will be from rebuilding the state in Congo. And to do this, we need the Congolese people to be in charge of their destiny, to be free from choosing their leaders, the leaders who will put people's interests first instead of their own interest. Because the politics in Congo is the source of personal enrichment. They are not there for the interest of the population. They are there to enrich themselves. So to rebuild the country, to rebuild the state, we need the people to support Congolese people in choosing their own leaders, and Congolese people to have their freedom, their independence, to be free from choosing their own leaders. And to do this, we need the support from the British public here to support us. I think a couple of years ago, Human Rights Watch requested that the British government hold accountable the British companies trading in Congo. The government declined their request. So we have a former Prime Minister, British Prime Minister, being paid by the money from the plundering of Congo minerals, which is Tony Blair being a special counselor, so a special advisor to Kagame. So we need the support from the British public to hold their government accountable from their policy in DRC. If they have to change their policy in DRC and hold accountable the British companies trading in Congo.
You would like to see Tony Blair explain what he's doing with Paul Kagame, would you?
He will never explain.
Have you ever asked him?
I I wish. But I know he's the special advisor to Kagame, and the money he's paid is from the plundering of Congo minerals. So we need a British public to support us in our struggle from addressing the root causes of the problem in Congo rather than the symptoms, which are like sexual violence or minerals. Because there is no regulation, there is no law which will work in Congo as long as there is a competent, irresponsible, corrupt government. So even the Dodd-Frank law or any resolution from the UN, nothing will work in Congo as long as we don't have a responsible government, as Councillor Jean Roger said. So, and I wanted to add something about the international community help to Congo. We saw in 2002 or 2003, the international community helping Congo to integrate the militia into the Congolese army, who yesterday they attacked our country, and overnight they become Congolese army, and they continue what they were doing in the first place, raping women and killing and plundering. So the international community help really for Congo. Yeah. I doubt about it because they are part of the problem in Congo.
Okay, thank you. Jean Roger, you wanted to come back on some of that.
Victoria, thank you very much indeed. I think you're right. Democracy is the way forward for Congo. Empowering people is the way forward. That is why I think the British government has supported the peace process in the DRC. That is why Tony Blair, whom you mentioned, his government and the government of Gordon Brown, they supported to defeat democratic process in the DRC in 2006 to support the first democratic elections in the DRC since independence of the DRC. I know the scale of the problem is very, very huge. This is a very complex problem. On Tony Blair, I don't know his personal matters, as I just explained. To be fair, Tony Blair was the first British Prime Minister to increase the British government involvement in trying to stabilize the DRC, Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. And the British government policy has shifted significantly compared to the past toward the DRC. I know that there is more to be done, but I think we should admit that the British government has tried to do something in the DRC.
Why do you think it is that President Kagame is so much better at getting international support than President Kabila? What's he offering?
This is what I was about to mention. The problem is the American policy toward the region. Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, they've tried to help the region, but the Americans have got their own views of balkanization of the region to create more small states to suit multinational companies and corporations. That is the American policy toward the region. And Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, they've worked hard to try and stop the American doing that. This is something people should know. And Kagame is protected by the American. Kagame is protected by especially the UN representative, the US American representative, Ambassador Susan Rice. So this is where the problem is America, Susan Rice protecting Paul Kagame.
But all the system.
Yeah, all the system, yeah. I agree with that, but President Obama personally has shifted his position. That is the position of the Democratic Party toward the region, because they believe in dismantling Congo untapped mineral wealth estimated at 30 trillion pounds.
It seems that multinational companies are doing pretty well out of Congo as it is at the moment. The biggest mining company is an American company, and then, as we said earlier, followed by Glencore and Dangote and so on.
That is why we need to put pressure on government.
Yeah.
On government to compel multinational companies to abide by the corporate social responsibility law.
You mean pressure here in Europe, not? You don't think there's any point in trying to put pressure on the Congolese government because it's not interested in dealing with corruption?
Pressure on this government, our government here, the American government, Western government, the international community. We need to put pressure because multinational companies are taking advantage of the situation. When you see that tax evasion is costing Congo 40 billion pounds per year. From tax evasion, from multinational company operating in the DRC. This is not fair. So there is something need to be done about making these multinational companies accountable.
Thanks. A couple of gentlemen over there.
There is a gentleman.
There's a gentleman since a long time.
Andy, can you just hang on, because I've just two people on the left, gentleman in the grey jacket first, and then the black jacket behind him, or whoever gets the mic first. Okay. Then certainly after you, sir. Yes. Sorry, can you tell us where you're from and your interest in Congo and everything?
I'm from the Congo originally, and I've been in the UK for the last 21 years. Now, I really don't disagree with much of what has been said so far. I'm actually quite impressed with the views, the range of views. And it's quite clear from what we've heard that the problems of Congo are quite complex. So it's not just one issue. It's to do with security, it's to do with institutional failure, it's to do with all sorts of other things, to do with leadership as well. And to be brief in terms of the question you asked about Paul Kagame, why does he get all that support? It's because he's a very good player at the international level. He's a very good political actor. He's very talented as a politician. That is not to say that I agree with his views or how he's gone about politics. And he's quite amazing how he works with the international, the international politics. Now, whilst I agree with everything that has been said, one component I think we have to emphasize is the fact that civil societies around the world can play a major role in actually helping the situation in the Congo. And we saw that actually even with Sierra Leone, similar issues where you had a country which also had a lot of intrusion from a neighboring country, Liberia. And the issue there was also, apart from institutional failure, leadership, and all the rest, like the Congo, you also had a problem with the resource, the natural resources being exploited illegally. Now, one of the things that did take place with a lot of campaigners is they captured popular imagination in terms of actually zooming on the Black Diamond issue, saying, look, the way trade is happening with diamonds is actually fueling the war in Sierra Leone. But it didn't mean that it was the only thing that was happening in Sierra Leone. There were many other issues that needed to be taken into account. But that was a mobilizing factor. And that's why, with Congo Calling, that's one of the things that we feel that has to be emphasized quite forcefully, because we all, as Noella was saying, we all use mobile phones, laptops, and all those things. It is true that those minerals are coming from the Congo. Much of it is coming from the Congo. Now, why should we just sit around and say, well, it doesn't really matter because leadership is failing, there is institutional failure, and so on? Why should we not ask those questions and saying, why should we allow that trade to continue to happen illicitly? So that's why it's important for us to make sure that we reach out into the civil society in the UK, in France, in the US, because when we do that, then we have mass support. We have the support that we need in order to exert pressure on all the other actors. And you know, many of you here are old enough to remember the anti-apartheid system. Now, why, by changing the bank that you bank with, would that, how can you see the link between changing your bank, the bank you banked with, and change in South Africa? A lot of people stopped buying wine from South Africa because it made an impact on how politics was being played in South Africa. So we always have to find the links that link us with whatever conflict there is. We're all part of it, and we have to make sure that we see how we are related to the conflict in the Congo. And that's why it's so important, as well as addressing all those issues, to take into account the role that civil societies can play around the world. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much for your contribution. And then there's a lady upstairs we're going to ask to speak after you, sir.
Thank you very much. The name's Ewan Grant. I'm a former intelligence analyst in the UK Customs Service, and my interest in mineral exploitation from DRC really started in 1998, which I would point out was before what I believe was a highly significant but widely overlooked incident in early 1999. I've worked in Africa, in the East African community, Tanzania, and my question is based on a number of issues, but it is largely based on the author Tom Clancy, who in the first books he wrote himself, very well connected, and he's a very well connected author. He always uses two phrases. One is, why didn't the dog bark? And the second one is, there's no substitute for looking people in the eye. How organized, equipped, financed, and properly manned, but above all, how motivated is the international community, civilian and military, developmental and security effort in the wider region? In the view of the panel, in the experience of any contacts they've had indirectly or directly with such persons, and the UNHQ in Nairobi perhaps comes to mind, what is it that motivates the UN staff in relation to the challenges in DRC and the wider region? And what is it that surprises you that doesn't seem to motivate them? In other words, when you look them in the eyes, what do you see and what do you not see?
Thank you very much. Lady upstairs, you've been waiting patiently. I don't know whether you're going to be able to yell or how you're going to get your... Oh, you got a mic. Great.
Hi, I'm Desmond Marcy from the Royal African Society. I'd like to respond quite concretely to the points that have been made on the issue of mineral exploitation and the illegality of some of the explorations, because these are quite serious allegations to be making. There is a compact in the OECD, and there's also the World Gold Council has got the conflict-free minerals compact that was established in December of 2012. So I mean, surely, Congo needs to make sure that these organizations in these compacts have teeth and don't fail like the Kimberley process did. That's the first point I'll make. I'll also say that South Africa's competition authority could provide a lot of very good case studies in terms of how to deal with multinational companies that do come into Congo. There need to be things like fines and conditionalities. Even if the Glencore Xstrata merger went ahead, at the governmental, practical level in Congo, nothing's stopping you from setting together a competition authority and making sure that CSR manifests in fines, in jobs as well for the local community and for your logistics and producers. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Andy, at the back there.
I work at Africa Confidential. I'm particularly interested to ask Ben and anyone else on the panel who wants to comment about why they think SADC force will make any difference at all. Isn't it just inviting another bunch of bystanders to watch while the people are chased hither and thither, their property stolen, they're forced to flee into other countries? I mean, the SADC member states are much less likely to stand up to DRC's neighbours that have got vested interest in chaos in the Kivas than the UN. And yet the UN, with 16,000 soldiers, I know they're not all in the Kivas, $1 billion worth of our taxpayers' money supporting that, won't do anything. I just wonder if it doesn't come back to, I mean, I don't agree with Jean-Roger, who said that the United States is deliberately balkanizing the region. But nonetheless, it does seem that the United States is the elephant in the bush, as it were, and won't permit the UN to take strong action to protect the territorial integrity of DRC. And I'd just be interested to know what you all think about that, because when you look at it, when you come to this issue fairly new, as I did a few months ago, you think, well, 16,000 soldiers, what are they doing? You know, are they playing solitaire?
Great. Thanks. Gentleman up there, in the balcony there. Thanks.
Hello, my name is David Killeen, and I'm a photographer. And my question is just in regard to the reluctance with the sort of Western opinion on Rwanda. And is it the reluctance among Western powers to criticize Rwanda is because it was ignored in the early 90s during the genocide there? Like there was an onus on the West that it should have intervened. And like today, Rwanda is viewed on paper as a country that's making massive change. I think it was one of the first countries to have a female majority in parliament, and they've made massive gains in terms of political and judicial reform. And is it that the West doesn't want to criticize this because this is one of the sort of few sort of, like, as I said, on paper, sort of good news in terms of advance of an African country advancing in Africa itself towards greater political stability and economic growth? That's just my question.
Thanks. Any more questions from the audience? Okay. Wow, great. Okay, shall we just take those three and then we'll do a round with the panel. Gentleman with the blue jumper. Thanks.
Thank you. My name is Simukai Chigudu. I'm a public health student at Imperial College. My question relates to something that Ben mentioned earlier on. I think that we've been speaking a lot about kind of security, governance, and international intervention, but Ben raised the point of citizenship and identity as being crucial to understanding the internal political dynamics of the Congo. And I think this is something that receives relatively little attention in our discourse on this country, but ultimately is fundamental to any change in moving forward. So I'd just like to ask Ben if you want to comment on that a little bit further.
Thank you. A couple more. Yes, that one and gentleman there. Yes, please.
Hi, this is actually not a question from me. It's from someone via Twitter.
Fine.
And it's Laura from London is asking, what are the prospects? I suppose it ties into the question you just asked, actually. What are the prospects for return for Congolese refugees in Rwanda, and what are the political implications of that?
Okay, thank you. And just behind you.
My name's Magnus Taylor. I work for the Royal African Society. I run a website called African Arguments, and we cover Central Africa and the Congo and Rwanda quite extensively. My question is just if one of the panelists could explain exactly where UK development policy towards Rwanda currently sits, because there seem to have been quite a lot of shifts over the last few months, possibly related to the personalities running the Department for International Development, perhaps related to Andrew Mitchell's departure. Plebgate related to that. And historically, there seems to have been quite a history of favouring Paul Kagame. I mean, perhaps the two most high-profile Minister for International Development, Claire Shaw originally was a big fan,
Right.
and then Andrew Mitchell, obviously from a different party. But yeah, under the new minister, where do we sit at the moment?
Thanks very much, Magnus. Okay, got quite a good list of questions now. Just to recap, do you mind if we... okay, go on. I'll ask you a question now, just in case we... Yep.
Quite like one, please. Hi there.
Hi.
Harry Duncan, working for Centre of African Development and Security, an independent NGO, UK-based advocacy organisation. I'd like to pick up on Bandy's comments earlier. I think he set the context well with the fact that DRC, as we all know, is a complex situation currently with many issues needing to be tackled. But I think just picking up on your point about what the international community can do, I agree with what he said, is that members of civil society can firstly vote with their money and not buy products which aren't being made with a conflict-free guarantee, which currently no corporation making a mobile telephone can do. So I think the consumer, we should take some power ourselves, and now that we're more aware of what's going on in Eastern DRC and that, you know, coltan is in everyone's mobile phone, has been mentioned a few times, I think the power to the consumer is something empowering for us all when we look at the muddling parts of the political process, security process. And actually, what Victoria mentioned earlier, sort of casting off the Dodd-Frank Act, was not something useful to us. We at Centre African Development and Security actually see it as quite a useful tool for NGOs like ourselves to lobby European governments, in particular UK government, to try and hold all corporations sourcing minerals from Eastern DRC to publish their supply chains effectively and try and ensure that those supply chains are not fueling conflict. And if people, I think in the US, they have done this in August last year. The reason being that a corporation had to stand up in court and say, as far as we know, our supply chains are not fueling conflict. And I think that gives some strong pressure on the corporations. In fact, we come in contact with a number who are now wanting to really try and address the security situation in Eastern DRC because they don't want to be implicated in any atrocities to reputational damage. So I personally think that's something that we as the international community can try and rally around and perhaps enforce at the European level to create a European standard for corporations.
Okay, thanks very much for that contribution. Okay, maybe we can start with Kasim and then Noella, because we haven't heard much from this end of the table.
The ignoring woman here.
Yeah, well, you know, just you've got to make your presence felt. Kasim first, and then Noella. Look, a very good question about the international community. Yeah. When you look into their eyes, what on earth are they doing in Congo? Are they sincere? Are they just there for the beer, or the Primus beer, or what are they trying to do? Why have they failed so badly? We've got a question about US policy. What on earth is US policy in Congo? Is it balkanization? Is it accommodation with Paul Kagame? Is it a guilt complex for presiding over the Rwandan genocide and failing to call it a genocide? And if so, what on earth do they think has happened in Congo over the past 15 years? And why don't they feel similarly guilty about that? And then we had the question about citizenship and identity. What are the points, the critical points that need to be raised, and why aren't they being raised? And finally, where are we with UK policy? Does the departure of Andrew Mitchell from the international development portfolio, does that presage change in British policy, or is British policy still very much in favour of Kigali and not very sympathetic to Kinshasa? Right. So take your pick, have a crack at those.
All right, Patrick, thank you very much. I'll just start probably with the question on Kagame.
because I think I'm in a more comfortable position to sort of address that for starters. Somebody, I think, asked a question as to why Kagame has been able to influence the international community, which, again, I think would answer the question on balkanization. Kagame, I think, is a very good campaigner. I think somebody from Congo Calling did mention it. He's one person, if you tweeted him now, you could get him straight away. If you did tweet President Kabila, you might get a month before you get a response. It's about how you do business. And I think this has influenced, despite whatever the international community has in mind over Congo or Rwanda, you would want a person you would want to do business with a person that you know that you can deliver. So, despite anything that you would say about Kagame, I mean, he's very tough as a person, he's very hardworking, he's on the ground, he micromanages, and that can have its own problems. But within Rwanda itself, you see that people are even scared of their own shadows. This is how far it goes to show you, I mean, someone who has micromanaged and he has got to that level. So if he was to go into a Congo situation, then you can imagine what could possibly happen. So that's why Kagame has been able to influence international opinion, despite other benefits that might be underlying that.
Is it a democracy or dictatorship in Rwanda?
Well, that was even one of the uncomfortable suggestions I was going to make about Congo, that probably it's time in Congo we had a benevolent dictator. You needed someone who can actually be a dictator but deliver. I'm afraid, but that's the feeling I have. Really? Because so you see a lot of policies.
Are you seriously saying then that I think it's now $1 billion have been spent on elections in Congo?
Yes.
You're seriously saying that was money badly spent? We should have just had a sort of like a Vatican-like process. Kabila should have retired, and the cardinals of Kinshasa should have chosen a new leader.
No, but probably that's a very simplistic way of putting it. But seeing what is on the ground, because given what the panelists have discussed, things that are failing to happen, there are simple tasks that you actually see that could have been implemented if you had a voice that was strong. President Kabila had the mandate, had the support of the people in 2006. He could simply have delivered on a few things that could have made a difference.
What about the others, Kasim? I mean, Kamatatu, Tshisekedi.
Yes.
There are a range of
political players.
We're missing a woman in Congo, I think.
Maybe. Noella, when are you going back and running for president?
No,
that's
not me.
The next question.
So, I mean, just within the politics, I think it just goes back to the same question of leadership, and that is very, very important. Second point is someone mentioned about citizenship and identity, and that is a very, very critical question. You get into particular parts of Congo and you're in a totally different world. I was lucky that in 1996-97, the war that removed Mobutu, I covered the war from the east to Kinshasa on foot. So basically I traversed much of Congo, and then I was there back in 1998 to 2000 when there was this second invasion in an effort to remove President Kabila Sr.
Right.
What you see is that no more Congolese people now, because we can complain about, the neighbors coming in to interfere and all that. But again, I'm throwing out a very difficult question, which is for the Congolese who are here. As Congolese, are we ready to talk? If we are ready to talk, what sort of form should this national dialogue take? Because it's very important. It's one thing just to blame everybody, but within the Congolese, what has happened on the ground to say that it has been frustrated as a result of this, but as Congolese, this is what we have done to try to make the process move. So the question is, are we ready to talk? Two, what form should the national dialogue take? The third thing is about the neutral force, where I have a problem as well. I think someone raised it there. This SADC force that is going to come to join up with even the mandate itself is still difficult to define, because they're saying they are going to be operating under the UN, under MONUSCO.
Yeah.
MONUSCO being the largest UN force in the world, peacekeeping force in the world. It has failed to deliver. Talking to most of these commanders, because we have done patrols with these commanders on the ground. You go on patrols in particular areas that have been attacked. You speak to them. There is experience. They have built experience over time. So whether they are Indian battalions or Pakistani battalions, which might be unfamiliar with the terrain in Congo, after 5-6 years, definitely have built up an experience and a particular pattern of what is happening. So you didn't need a new force to come in. It's very, very confusing to have a neutral force. Yes, you'll have South Africans. South Africans have had a bit of luck with Burundi because they managed to bring back sense. But that is where the Burundians themselves had decided it is time we get out of this mess. So the South Africans actually came to participate. You can be a peacekeeper. You can only be a peacekeeper if there is a peace to keep. But you don't have peace, it's difficult to keep any peace. So there is confusion on this neutral force, and it has been actually challenged by several of the countries concerned, like Rwanda and Uganda, probably for obvious reasons, because it would make it uncomfortable. But you're adding new people into a situation that is already confused. What has MONUSCO, have we carried out an evaluation of MONUSCO to see what it has delivered to the extent that then we can say this is what the neutral force will deliver? You have 17,000 failing to do something that you want 8,000 to come and deliver on. I think it's a bit of a difficult one on that. The final one, I think, is the return of Congolese refugees in Rwanda. Again, this is a story that I've been very close to. It actually just brings to the fore the complexity of the Congo question. Because many of the Congolese refugees that are in Rwanda are Banyamulenge. They are sort of Kenya-Rwanda speaking Congolese.
You would have in mind, there are about 50,000, there were about 70,000. Some of them, I think, either moved to second countries. Now there are about 35,000 in Rwandan refugee camps. The dilemma is you have felt, because they speak Kenya-Rwanda, that they actually would feel comfortable living in Rwanda, but they've continued to live in refugee camps. And they don't feel Rwandan at all. They feel like they are Congolese and they need to go back to Congo. Unfortunately, they say they feel unsecure to go back to Congo. I don't know what it would take for them to feel assured to go back to Congo, but it is still a dilemma that has to be addressed. Right? There is always a feeling that, for example, they speak in Rwanda and therefore they should be comfortable in Rwanda. Unfortunately, that's not how they feel. They feel actually left out. They are not part of Rwanda. They would rather be in Congo.
Finally, this issue about the international agencies, the UN officials, you've come across a lot in your career as a journalist.
I was trying to avoid that.
Just give us a sort of a candid view of what you think motivates these characters, and do they have Congo's interest at heart, or quite the reverse, they're just time servers?
I'll tell you what ordinary Congolese have told me, probably just to exonerate myself. The view is that they are there for the money. So as long as the contract is running, it is perfectly fine.
Right.
Some people have seen a few NGOs that have gone in and really sort of pushed in and tried to make a difference. But at the end of the day, it just goes back to the Congolese. They will have to clean up the mess, whatever remains. So if I'm to be honest with you, this is what many Congolese, not all of them, but many Congolese have said. They just see wanakuja tu kwa kujipatia maisha hapo. They come to sort of feed on the life here.
Thanks very much. Noella, have a crack at these questions.
I think we talk about a lot of neighborhoods country, Rwanda, the implication and everything. I think the solution has to come from Congo. The solution has to come from Congolese people. Congolese people are not warriors. So you're coming to their country, you're invading, you're looting their country. They kind of, I think they're afraid, but I think if they see that the world is with them, that we are with them, they can stand and say, okay, this is my country. We're gonna stop the looting. We want a stronger government. That's what I think we need to empower the people and empower the movement of the grassroots. If not, in the next few years, we'll still be continuing, because we have the community international, we have the UN, we have all these forces, 15 years, and more and more and more disasters, and the development of the country, it doesn't develop.
So it's a lack of national spirit, lack of patriotism. What's the issue? I mean, why are Rwandans so active?
Rwanda is a PR machine. And I think this was good that the British government cut the aid, and we still, I think the aid cannot go, the war cannot be fulfilled with all these aid and the things, but to put only the blame on Uganda or Rwanda is not only the solution.
Have you ever
Even if they build the country in one way with the minerals of the Congo. But you are very diplomat, you didn't answer my question. Is Rwanda a democracy or a dictatorship?
Well, it's a democracy because they've had elections, but it's a dictatorship because it depends what you say and what happens after you say it. Does that answer your question?
What do you think, the audience? They don't answer. all diplomatic.
Do you want to talk about any of the other issues, on the identity issue, on the...
The identity is a massive, is a big problem. But I think the Congolese are completely against the Balkanization. They want one Congo, they want the solution, they need this strong leadership, and they need to go to see that we are in one ship and we are advancing.
I mean, we've had a couple of contributions, people who are doing very good work in the diaspora, Congolese in the diaspora, trying to organize campaigns to raise the consciousness of people in the West about what's going on. Do you see ways in which they could have interlocutors in Congo? There seems to be a lot of this stuff seems to be happening here in the West, doesn't seem to have much connection with what's going on the ground. Can you see ways in which, I mean, your own organization, your own foundation, for example, you're doing positive work in Congo, ways that could be extended in other fields, not just in schools, but in other fields, getting people's efforts...
we need doctors, politicians, educated politicians, we need educated lawyers, we needed a completely entire system. It's a reason you need to invest absolutely in education, and we don't have middle class in the Congo. But, okay, the school we have and everything is at a certain level, but we need to bring to the next level and to invest all together. But to see a room like that, a few years ago it didn't happen. We couldn't even mention Rwanda or Uganda. To see a room that has interest of what is happening, not only on the humanitarian crisis, because we have in the last few months, last few years, we have more than 1 million people misplaced. So it's enormous. When we hear about Congo, it's always the rape or the looting of violence, but the looting of minerals, but I think it goes beyond that. And I think Congolese people inside the country need a big shake, but they are afraid and they're suffering. They're looking how they're going to feed their family tomorrow, how they're going to send the children. Our school is free, but most of the school in Congo are paid. I have my sister, we have to pay $50 a month that she go to school. So people are living in their own life and they don't have they don't think about the issue of the Congo, if Congo is going to be balkanized or what is happening at the State Department, etc. I used to live in New York, so the Congo is getting very big in America. More talks, more discussion, but we're still missing this part to say, okay, let's stop the war, let's stop this looting of the country. So we need more policies, but with the Congolese people. We cannot impose what will happen in the Congo without the Congolese people saying that's what we want. They need a voice.
And can you and your organization be that voice? Does it have to be a professional politician, or can it be...
I'm not into politics at all.
What about civic activists?
Yeah, we need activists.
Yeah.
We need more and more. And the diaspora is getting there, but we need one followers, one leader.
Are there
and I think we have Kabila as a president. Either we like him or we don't like him. We need to collaborate. We need to help them to be stronger and strengthen the government and work with what we have. He's going to be president for the next 3-4 years or even more. We don't know. Do you think he will stay longer?
Sure. Thanks very much, Nola. Okay. Can we just have sort of one last round? Jean-Roger and Ben.
There was a question about America's policy of balkanization of the DRC. I'm afraid that was the policy from the Democratic Party, and that policy has quite changed, evolved. There are fewer members of the Democratic Party who are still pursuing that policy, such as Susan Rice. I supported President Obama's campaign through an organization called Organizing for America, which now Organizing for Action. This is a political organization for President Obama. I have managed to influence the change of the perception toward the policy of balkanization of the DRC.
And I'm very pleased that it is changing within the Democratic Party. And there was a question about companies from South Africa operating in the DRC, abiding by the corporate social responsibility laws, which is true. It is because a memorandum of understanding was signed between the South African government,
Congolese government. And this is where I think why we are requiring our companies to abide by corporate social responsibilities. Actually, there is a need for British company to go and invest in the DRC. There is a need for investment because the DRC has huge potential economic possibilities there. You could invest in agriculture because of the Congo River,
Congo Basin, which hold, I think, 60% of the forest inside the DRC. You could invest in logging industry, and fishery, and getting more electricity, generating more electricity with the Congo River, building more dams there to produce more electricity.
We need roads.
Exactly, we need road, we need infrastructure, we need schools, hospital, airport, and this is where I say that this exhibition is about I Dream Congo. Yes, I dream Congo. I dream Congo as a very strong country, a land where women will be protected, a land where children will be protected, girls and boys will go to school, a land where state institutions will function properly, a land where democracy will be there, will make a way, a land where good governance will be the rule, a land where there will be a rule of law, a land where there will be plenty of opportunities for the DRC to emerge as a powerhouse in the Central Africa, a land where the Congolese people will be friends to the British people, a land where the DRC will be one day a member of the Commonwealth to strengthen its human rights record, to make progress on democracy, peace, good governance, and prosperity. This is my dream.
Thank you very much. Ben.
This is our dream. This is what the Congolese
Ben,
want.
please, just can you give your responses and then we'll have to wrap up, unfortunately.
Graham, very quickly. The question, Nesta set questions about Rwanda and development and, you know, the UK policy on it and how it's perceived. I think there's some interesting stuff about the way development itself is evolving over time, the idea of development. And, you know, the idea that was dominant towards the end of the 90s, early 2000s, I suppose, of this new generation of Africa's leaders that looked at Ethiopia, Rwanda, Uganda, Eritrea to some extent as dynamic, effective leaders. One by one, they've sort of fallen off their podiums a little bit. You know, Eritrea is obvious, but Ethiopia, Rwanda, Uganda, to some extent, there's been questions asked. And I think Rwanda was a bit emblematic of a very apolitical definition of what development meant. That it was about delivery, and if you look at delivery and you look at the efficient use of resources and accounting for the money that's been given, Rwanda is very, very good. You know, and the progress on those terms that Rwanda's made since '94 is extraordinary. So for me, the change is in part at least about a development inside the development agenda, if that makes any sense. You know, that there's been a growing realization that you can't do development without looking at politics, and you can't do development without looking at the impact of what seems to be you know, practical spending towards pro-poor outcomes. So that's one thing. This, again, big question of citizenship and identity. Yes, it's very, very complicated. The history of Congo's nationality laws, you know, we could talk about it for hours. One thing that's fascinating to me as an outsider is the seeming contradiction between a very strong nationalist sentiment, you know, people are very proud of being Congolese, and a very clear localisms about connections to land. You know, the idea of autochthony or of nativism that people talk about. And how that's resolved, I don't know. You know, it'll be about re-establishing some level of social contract, about a relationship with the state that means something. And that, I think, has to come from devolving power down to local levels where people can have a relationship with someone who can achieve any form of change for them. And if you can do that, you can maybe break these connections between a primal idea of land and identity, which is one of the big problems about returning refugees, that they're going to return to land that people think is owned by other people. And that's the recipe for another round of conflict. So that'll have to be handled very, very carefully. But the Pandora's box of land in Eastern Congo it's impossible. I mean, how you unpack who owns what after all the different layers of migration and movement and dispute is very difficult indeed. If I may, one very quick last point about the SADC deployment. Will they be a bunch of bystanders? Well, I would be under no illusions they'd go out there and fight the good fight. My positive reaction to it is more about the understanding of a lot of political processes in Eastern DRC being theatrical. They're played outwards and they're played for effect. And as a symbolic move that raises the stakes for those people who've been involved with rebel groups, I think it's important. And almost no more than that. And it almost doesn't even have to be deployed. It's about the weight of wider East African opinion and wider Southern African opinion being brought to bear on the people, on the governments, perhaps on the actors who've been behind some of the problems. So will it be a solution to everything? Absolutely not. Hopefully it wouldn't make things worse, but as a symbolic move that changes the stakes of the political calculations being made, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but I'll stop.
Great, thanks. Just finally, Noella, you spoke about your foundation, the Malaika
Georges
Foundation.
Malaika, yes.
Yes. Can you just tell people here, anyone who's interested in getting involved, supporting it in any way, it's about education and initiatives in Congo. Can you tell people what to do?
Yes, they can go on the website www.gmfafrica.org. But I'm not here to brand my own foundation. I think there's fantastic foundation in East Congo, in all over Congo, that are grassroots Congolese people working, and I encourage everyone to really look into them. And I'm working privately. I support a lot of other foundations in the Congo, and I'm very happy to share with all of you. And I think with all the points we say, I think we all come back to a point. Congo need an army. We need an army to protect our land. Without an army, we can have all the forces neutral that we come into Congo, but it's not the solution.
Right.
It can be a part of the solution, but it has to come in a middle way where we work together.
Join the army then. Okay.
You will call that what the name will be, because every year there's another name.
Okay, on that note, thank you very much for coming. Thank you for being part of this, and I hope you've felt it was worthwhile. And there are lots of areas in which you can sort of get involved, clearly, in the issues, the exhibition, the week, the campaigns we've heard about this evening. So let's hope it will be part of a process that's going to help Congo change, and look forward to seeing you at the next event.
And please, tomorrow, I want to say one thing.
Noella.
Yeah, tomorrow at 11 a.m., if some of you are free, let's all rise, 1 billion voice. Tandy Newton will be at the parliament. She's a huge advocate for Congo, and she went to the East Congo. So 11 tomorrow a.m. we will be all there. No more violence on women or domestically or any ways of raping.